I'm sitting here today with Andres. How do you pronounce your name, Andres?
Andres Guadamuz.
Andres Guadamuz.
Yeah.
And he's a professor at intellectual property law at the University of Sussex. And he's also the author of the long-running blog TechoLlama, which has been going on for 20 years and has been a major inspiration for me in my own writing of a futuristic lawyer. So I'm very happy to have you here in my virtual studio today, Andres. How are you feeling?
Fine, thanks. And thanks for the invitation and thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. What are you working on at the moment? What are you thinking about?
So I mostly, my research generally for past 20 years has been in the interface between law and technology in general, just generally speaking. Um, so for the about 5 to 7 years, I've been thinking quite a lot about artificial intelligence. So it's still AI related, but I'm trying to move to other things. I've done copyright infringement and other things. Right now, I'm writing on the EU AI Act, a small note, and also on sound cloning and voice cloning, which is my new fascination. So right now, the next article I'll be writing is going to be about voice cloning.
Looking forward to it. It's a very timely topic for sure.
Yeah.
And some of the concepts I've learned for you is the input phase question and the output phase question. Could you give our viewers a quick description of those concepts?
Yes, certainly. What we're talking about when we are dealing with with artificial intelligence, sorry, from the perspective of copyright, particularly intellectual property in general, is is very useful to try to think of two different stages on the training of artificial intelligence and then producing the outputs. So the training phase is what we usually call the input phase. And that is where an AI is taught by looking and analyzing large amounts of data. And I'm talking vast amount of data, billions and billions and billions and billions of words, for example, in the case of text. Sometimes billions of images when it comes to images, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what is called the ingestion phase or the input phase. And that involves the copying sometimes of data at a local setting, and then that training takes place by the machine learning algorithms, looking at that data and analyzing it, extracting useful information, and then that leads to a model being created. I'm obviously oversimplifying this. And that model, once trained, it doesn't contain any of the copies of the training data, but it can be used to produce outputs. And an output is just whenever you ask ChatGPT, write me a poem or write me a song in the style of Taylor Swift, or write me a poem, or write me a couple of paragraphs explaining what artificial intelligence is and things like that. That is, once the model is trained, it's not searching for information, but it's actually looking for patterns that it learned, usually word patterns. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that is what we call an output. So the output would be your text from ChatGPT, or it would be an image from Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, or a song from Suno, etc., etc. So that is what we understand as the output.
Nice, thanks for that explanation. And it seems like the AI community is kind of dividing into two camps at the moment. There's one camp which is saying that these AI companies are stealing the work of artists to train AI models. And there's another camp that says that all public data on the internet is freeware. This is what the Microsoft CEO Mustafa Suleyman has said. How do you regard that question, and which camp are you in?
As usual, I'm sort of in neither camp. It's a little bit more complicated and nuanced than that. I don't believe that the use of words like stealing is appropriate, and this has been happening since early days of the internet. People were using the words thief and stealing, um, uh, almost in exact the same context. Um, Copyright infringement is not theft in the legal sense. So I usually try to make very clear that try to stay away from the charged language. But also, I think that the Microsoft CEO is wrong in the use of his interpretation of how the internet works when it comes to copyright. So I don't think that everything that is on the internet, to paraphrase what he said, is free to use or free to for everyone to abuse. So I think that what we have to look at here is different interests. I like to think of it more in lines of technology that we already have. So, for example, the internet and web search has been in use for decades now. Now more than 30 years. This is a technology that is precisely built on scraping data. So this is something that already takes place, that has been taking place for the last 30 years. And we've sort of gotten used to it, but also found legal ways of allowing this to happen. So what I think is potentially going to happen, and we'll have to look at the cases and we'll have to look at the resolution and everything. But potentially, what I see is we'll find ways for trying to probably not please everyone, because that is almost impossible. But at least for some technology to be allowed to develop in ways that benefits all users, but also benefits the creators. And I talk like that as someone that vast amount of my writings are in the training data, and I think it's potentially. So I'm a stakeholder in this. It's not only up in the air. But yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that there has to be some form of middle way in which we recognize that this technology can be useful. I think that there are definitely some uses to it. I use it all the time as a non-native English speaker, but also that there is recognition that some people are not happy with this. So I think that eventually things will equalize. We are in one of those strange times in which everything is like up in the air a little bit.
Right. And one law case that is followed by many people in the community is, of course, the New York Times case against Microsoft and OpenAI. And one of New York Times claims is that the OpenAI have used paywalled article from the New York Times to train GPT-4 and GPT-3 and so on. How do you perceive that case? Who do you think will win it, and do you think it will make a real difference?
Oh, I have no idea who is going to win. Both lawyers, or the lawyers for both sides, are formidable. This is one of those really high-powered cases where you can see that is probably going to go to the minutia, and it may depend on which judge and what arguments are presented to the judge. So I think this case initially looked quite strong for the New York Times. I have been less convinced, particularly in recent months. There was, or actually recent weeks, there was a revelation that the New York Times doesn't intend to use some of the outputs that it had generated. I was always suspicious about those outputs, but anyway, this could go either way. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't bet any on this outcome, because it can can come to very, very detailed minutia. I think that the New York Times has a really strong case. And this is probably the strongest of the cases of all of the ongoing AI cases. But also, I think that potentially OpenAI may have a few arguments that could work in their favor, particularly arguing that the source of the articles are not paywalled, but come from other sources where those articles can be found. For example, the Internet Archive. So that the copies do not come directly from the New York Times. And this has been an argument that has already been made by the defendants in the case. So I don't think we can even begin to imagine what the outcome is going to be. I've called it from the start. This can go either way. But also the other thing that you have to consider is that whoever wins, whoever loses is probably not going to just let it go. And there are going to be appeals. And then there's probably going to be an appeal to an appeal. And this has the potential to go all the way to the US Supreme Court. That is, however, if the case continues. Because something else that one prediction that I did make at the start is that there is a very strong potential for this case to be settled out of court. Legacy media knows that the game is up in some ways. And you see them trying to make arrangements and agreements with lots of companies. OpenAI is an example of a company that has already made some agreements with large providers of news, like and large providers of text, like Springer, Axel Springer, and things like that. So I think that all of these companies are jockeying for position, and they're using some of the cases to negotiate. So I wouldn't be surprised at all, and actually I would be not surprised at all if this is settled out of court.
And there's also a newer case. I don't know if you've had the time to read it yet, but that's of course against the AI music company Suno and Udio. And that's all the major American record labels that have sued them in a pretty big class action lawsuit. I find that one to be very interesting because you can clearly hear that some of these songs are infringing on the record label's copyright. The songs are almost identical. For instance, there is All I Want for Christmas is You by Mariah Carey. Udio could generate a song that was identical to that one, for instance. So to me, it seems like a strong case. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And this is the other of this one of the strongest cases as well. I've listened to some of the songs, so it will be interesting to see how that worked out. What I find quite interesting is that I think it's too good to be true. And these companies must have known that they were going to get sued. And actually, I've seen and I've heard reports from the venture capitalists that they knew that they were going to get sued. So I don't know if there is something else going on in this case. It's almost too perfect. Now, it could be exactly what it says on the tin, and it could be a case that is absolutely straightforward, in something akin to Napster back in the early peer-to-peer internet days, which was pretty much an open and closed case. But I think that there is something else going on, because there is a potential there for maybe a few surprises. So but I agree. It is a very strong case. What I wonder is if there is a surprise, like they didn't use any music from in the training that from the companies, that they used other type of inputs. I don't know, but there is going to be a very interesting twist there, because they must have known that they're going to get sued.
One would think so.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. In fact, the music training models were the last to sort of come out because everyone knew that the music generation was possible. And I've known quite a lot of people who were working on this from a technical perspective. And they said, oh, yeah, is music outputs are amazing. It's really easy. Um, so yeah, I don't know. There is something. I think that there's probably going to be a twist. If there isn't, these companies are not going to survive the first decision, probably.
And I don't
Uh,
know if you have had time to play with Suno and Udio and create these AI generated songs. I have personally I've experimented a bit with it, and I think it's absolutely amazing what we can do technologically. And I also sympathize with these artists who are worried about their work.
mhm,
Because if these AIs can just instantly generate songs that can compete on the same terms as human music,
mhm.
what's up with artists' livelihoods? So I sympathize with them quite a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. Me too. I don't know. I've played a lot with it. I don't. It's sort of novelty. I haven't produced a single song that I would listen to or I would think can compete with a live musician. But of course, that is not the issue. The issue, the people who are going to get affected are the people down the chain, the food chain in music production, particularly jingle makers and things like that, who probably are just going to disappear if this technology continues. Yeah. Um, I don't think this is going to take Taylor Swift out of business.
Probably not,
Yeah,
because there's also this personal connection between the artist and the listener, and that's really hard to replace with AI.
yeah. I am a music buff. I have spent so much money on music in my lifetime. I used to buy tapes. I'm dating myself here. I used to buy tapes. I used to obviously first pirate tapes. That's what we used to do. Then bought tapes, then bought the same technology as a CD. Then um, now I'm rebuying all of my collection as vinyl. So I have a very strong connection with music. I love going to concerts and to gigs. Music is part of my identity and who I am. And music has already been struggling, and that is before AI. And this is in large part because of the music industry hasn't been very good, and also some of the technologies that haven't been good to musicians. So no, I can't imagine ever, at least in the near future, and listening to um, eh, any type of AI music for my own consumption. At least I don't. It is good in some ways, but it's really not for me. Um, at least now, I don't see a competition in the top end. As you say, there is a very important, strong connection with the musicians. I think that just going to a live gig, it's irreplaceable. I don't think AI is ever going to replicate that.
I feel the same way. It brings my mind to another topic that I think could be relevant in this context because a few years ago, blockchain technology was a big thing. And one of these things that people were talking about was that NFTs could save music, like digital ownership. Suddenly, people could own tokens that represented their songs. So for a while there, it seemed like there were hope for creators getting more money. Now it seems like kind of the opposite. Now AI has stepped in and kind of devalued the economic value of art. For instance, let's say that movie studios need a new soundtrack for a movie. Maybe they could AI generate it to save some money. I don't think that's the right thing, and I don't think they should do it. I don't think they will do it because I completely agree with you that AI music is not really at the same quality as human music. But I think the difference between the blockchain hype and the AI hype is quite interesting because the blockchain hype was trying to bring ownership back to the creators and to the people, and Web3 and users were going to be like sovereign individuals on the internet. And that has all been forgotten now, like a few years later. It's pretty amazing how fast the hype comes and disappears again. What do you think? How do you think the AI hype is different from the crypto hype?
It's a really, really good question. I never bought into the blockchain hype, other than from a legal perspective. I think I was fascinated by it, absolutely fascinated. Um, it was a confluence of everything that I find fascinating. So I always thought it was very interesting from a legal perspective. Now, I um, I always my method of tackling or doing some technological legal analysis is to immerse myself in the technology. One of the things that I tried when NFTs started was to mint my own NFTs. I taught myself. I tried to teach myself all of this technology. So I could see how clunky it was from the start. And I think that's a very big difference. Me dedicating quite a lot of time to this. It was very difficult for me to even get the technology working. Even after minting an NFT, I lost lots of money just in the minting process. It was extremely not user friendly, and I could not see this scaling up. So it was always going to be a very niche community that would use it. I think that potentially the concepts behind smart contracts are legally interesting, but also the concepts of the ownership of assets. It's also very interesting, but the implementation of it was very clunky. The technology maybe wasn't there. It wasn't evolved enough. AI is very different because immediately, again, I immersed myself. I could install models in my computer. I could start replicating and using the technology immediately, and I could see immediately this. Wow, this has a future. This is amazing. So whether producing outputs on music and images or text, I think that there is definitely something there. It's already in use. Maybe it's not going to be as hyped as people think, but it's already being incorporated in large number of products, and particularly Apple, I think it's going to be a big thing. So I can see the difference just in usability. The proof is in whether or not you can sit someone that is completely unfamiliar with technology and they can use it. And I have seen this. People who is very intuitive. Some of these tools can produce something, just type a few things and you get a result. So that in itself is the big difference between the two technologies. It is possible that blockchain and NFTs may survive um, uh, into the future, but it's not going to be the big revolution that everyone thought, or at least proponents thought it was going to be.
I see what you mean.
Mhm.
Also, AI is the value proposition is very easy to understand. You can put some text into ChatGPT and it can reply with a sensible response. That in itself is pretty amazing. Whereas Bitcoin and NFTs are spent many hours discussing with friends and families and parents about how Bitcoin work and how crypto and NFTs work. And I don't think they ever quite understood it, to be honest. It's very hard to explain what is exactly the value proposition.
Mm.
So I definitely see the difference there. Do you think that we're in the middle of a hype cycle? Personally, when it comes to AI, do you think that this will like last for a few years, where this AI will just grow to be extremely powerful and a huge productivity booster for people? Or what is your intuition? Do you think it will settle down?
It's a difficult one because I don't think it's too hyped at the moment. There is definitely we're in a big hype cycle. Uh, so even myself, I've sort of started playing quite a lot with images, and I was sharing them a lot. And now I've sort of lost interest, and I will use it for producing specific images for presentations or things like that. So I can see even myself, an early adopter, sort of losing some interest with this. It has become too normalized in some ways. So definitely there is, it was overhyped at some point. Um, However, I think that is just too useful in some areas. Uh, Being able to produce just an image that you can use for a presentation, to me, it's invaluable. That reflects what is in my head. That can be extremely useful. I continue using things like ChatGPT and Claude for in my own writing, not to write anything. I don't like how it writes, but for checking my grammar. It's been invaluable for that. I am a non-native English speaker. Sometimes it just passing some text through a checker, telling it even understands, keep the voice or keep the same tone or keep the same style, but fix the grammar. And the later models can do this quite well. So if you have your voice, me as a writer, to me, my voice is very important. Um, and a system that allows me to maintain that voice, it's like a good editor. So in that sense, it's fantastic. So I can definitely see uses that are going to continue as we go along. I don't know if it's going to be the big um, productivity boost that some people are arguing. I think it's going to be very dependent on skill. People who are able to use the technology well are probably going to be more productive and do well. But that is the same with every single technology that we have invented. The same happens with Microsoft Word, with Photoshop, or with Microsoft Excel. You know, there are people who are very good at it and can use it to boost their productivity, and there are people like me who, if you give me Excel, I can barely make it work.
How about your students? So how do they use ChatGPT, and do you tell them not to?
Oh yes, they're using it. Oh my God, yes. That's that's definitely happening. It's an interesting one. We have rules now. My own initial take on this was very lenient. I didn't care as long as the essay was good, if that makes sense. So if you can use ChatGPT to produce a good essay, then good on you. Good for you. Um, However, that is not official policy, and the university now has, and actually almost every university has the same policy, which is that this is cheating. It's personation because you did not write it yourself. So if caught, people are going to uh, are going to fail the course. Um, it's complicated because I've seen people using it, and some students are using it pretty badly. There's no nice way of saying this, but I've seen very, very poor uses of this, where the people produce an essay that was almost entirely written by ChatGPT, and it was first very bland, second full of errors because AI hallucinates, and also um, it just had very basic text that didn't say anything, which is, you know, an AI is not an expert. So I think that the people who were using it badly are not doing well. I think that I may have marked essays that were using ChatGPT, but they use it properly, like like a language model to help you edit, to help you maybe even organize your ideas. I think that's perfectly fine. So they are definitely using it, and I think that there is a lot of enthusiasm for AI, at least in the students. I think students have adopted it. There's also quite a lot of people who are using it for knowledge and as search engines, which scares me a little bit, but that's a different question. But yeah, I definitely see quite high adoption with the students. What I think potentially is going to happen is we'll move away from essays, for example. I think that the essay now is dead. Anyway, we don't have the resources to police this. Yeah, but I've failed quite a lot of students for use of AI, not because they used the AI, but because the essays were pretty bad. They're just dreadful.
I see. That's an important distinction.
Mm-hmm.
My first thought when I started learning what ChatGPT was at in elementary school and high school, everyone was going to use this to cheat. That was going to be the main use case.
Yeah.
And for a while, it pretty much was. And I can't say that I blame them. If I was in high school or in elementary school, I would have used it too, for sure. But
yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think that I wouldn't. Mostly because I love writing, but that's probably not everyone loves writing as much as I do. So
it's more that you have to write
yeah.
under an obligation.
Yeah, but even then, I sort of always relished that. I just loved writing essays. I don't know. I was a weird student.
Yeah, maybe it was the same for me, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. But
Yeah,
I
but
can
I don't
definitely see
know.
the temptation.
Maybe with a tight deadline, and maybe I would have been tempted, but I would have liked to think that I would have been better at what some examples I've seen.
Right. But we also have to recognize that it gives some students an advantage. That was something I saw quite often in law school, that the students that did very well, funnily enough, also had parents that were lawyers or judges and could help them with their schoolwork, and they had like friends and all that. But then there are other people from non-academic backgrounds, and they struggle a lot. So they are at a huge disadvantage. And it would be great if ChatGPT, and of course, it's not ChatGPT, it's going to be many other AI models and AI solutions that could help these students from non-academic backgrounds to do a bit better and kind of lift
Yeah.
them up.
Yeah, I think that the way I've seen it and I've envisaged its usage is as a language model. It's in the name. It's to help you with the language, and that as I mentioned, it can be checking your grammar, checking your writing, even reordering your ideas or making them clear.
And I can also
Because
see, sorry to interrupt, but I was just thinking that students who don't like to write, they have a perfect tool for ChatGPT. Whereas like people like you and me who like to write essays, we don't really need it. I couldn't see myself use it.
yeah, I couldn't use it to write. I've tried. I I tried whenever I've tried to sort of use it for a blog post. I hate how it comes out. I have a very specific way of writing, a very specific voice, and it can never replicate it. It has helped me to sort of improve some of my grammar. So uh, that's probably going to be an interesting exercise in the future.
What about giving you feedback on your writing? Have you tried that?
No, no. It's usually when I ask it to check my grammar, it says, "Oh, this is very clear." So it usually compliments me. Uh, it's very polite with me. I use more recently I've been using Claude, and Claude is very nice and polite with me and very friendly. I always say thank you and please.
Yeah, same for me actually. I
Yeah.
stopped using ChatGPT. I use also Claude and also one called Hey P.
Yeah.
Have you tried that one?
No, I haven't really, but I've heard good things. Yeah, I I only have time for a couple of models at the moment. I tried Google's Gemini at some point. It's lagging behind a bit, but it can be good for. It has its own uses as well. Um, I found it very useful for presentations. Google Gemini actually. For example, I gave it some notes that I had written, and I asked to turn them into slides, and it did amazing job of that specifically. The notes were mine, and I said, can you turn this into a presentation? It's great for class preparation
That's
in that
super
sense.
useful
Yeah,
because that's one of those tasks that are not really that interesting to do. It's something we just have to do.
yeah,
And that is where, I think AI could be of great help
yeah.
to make those kind of things easier for us.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think that there is definitely a future for all of this. It's not going to be the AI-powered super future in which we are going to be cyborgs, but I think definitely is going to be more like the internet, more like search engines, more like it's going to be incorporated in little ways into our life that hopefully are going to be uh, um, unintrusive, but also are going to allow us to do things a little bit faster, better. I mean, how did we do research before the internet? It was having to go to a library and find the books. I think of AI in sort of similar way.
And what about this Web 2, Web 3 distinction that was very significant in the blockchain crypto world back in the days?
Yeah, I
Bef
never really bought into it because the idea I could understand the idea that sort of the own web, or instead of the read-write web, you'd have either object-oriented web or a web where you owned resources. Um, yeah, I wasn't entirely sure that that was ever going to fly. Um, I think that Web 2, for whatever, um, love it or hate it, I think it's been a success story in many ways. We're still in that paradigm. Um, I cannot see it changing, at least with the blockchain technology that we have at the moment. It's still too clunky for any use. Anyone who has ever tried to use uh, blockchain or smart contracts knows that it's still difficult, and it's difficult on purpose. I mean, part of the technology, the security is based on the fact that it requires all of this verification of and validation of the transaction. So yeah, it, it is going to be difficult. Yeah, I never really bought into that. The metaverse is another one that I never really uh, bought the hype.
and isn't it funny now that we talk about it? I just, think about how that Andreessen Horowitz, who earned a ton of money on the Web 2 paradigm, all these, apps and social media companies they funded, they are the one preaching Web 3, which is kind of the opposite of Web 2. That's quite funny to think about.
Yeah, I don't know what to um make of them. I think that they have been very successful in many ways, but also they have been backing some of the technologies that I just don't see happening. To be quite honest, I just don't think that there are enough use cases for this or enough implementation. Yeah, but I agree. I haven't thought about it that way. They're very much invested in AI now, which is is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, that's what they do, right? They follow
Yeah,
trends.
yeah, exactly. So they jump from now. Yeah, it's VCs do what VCs do. One of the advantages of being just a lowly academic commentator is that I just can look from the silence, very
Hmm.
amused, and write blog posts and articles on that, on the developments.
It's quite nice. I see. Uh, so you've been writing this blog for 20 years now.
Yeah.
What can you talk a bit about what your motivation was for it to begin with and what made you keep going?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because um, I started when sort of everyone had their blog. At some point, like 20 years ago, just every single person had a blog. It was the thing that you did. You had a MySpace page or live journal and the blog. Um, and reading back at my early output, I was using it like Twitter in many ways. It was interesting. It was very, very, very short, one paragraph uh, ideas with a link. So it wasn't until a bit later that I actually got the hang of it. And I started getting an audience at some point. And it was when I started writing a little bit more longer, more considered um, articles and not just writing reactive pieces every day or something. So I think that what has kept me going is that I'm very stubborn and I just it, it's part of my process of research. So it has continued to be useful for me. Even if nobody was reading it, I would still write it because I tend to start all of my ideas as a blog post. So um, I think, oh, this is interesting. I can see if there has been a reaction. Sometimes I use it to sort of refine my ideas. So some of the ideas that I had initially, I don't believe that anymore. I think my ideas have changed. So it's very good sounding board, but also very good to refining and improving your own ideas. So eventually, the resulting article tends to be much better because of that. So I think that's why I kept at it. When many people just desisted with blogs because they take a lot of time, they take a lot of effort, and not everyone enjoys it. To some people, it was more of a chore that they needed to do. So at least for me, it has been persistence that I just enjoy it. And yeah, the end result is that I still enjoy it to this day.
From my own experience, I also think it's very liberating to be able to write about whatever I want and say whatever I want, how I want it. Because for like academic writing, it has to be very form specific. And especially at the law school, I think it was so boring because we could not use any expressions. We have to formulate sentences in a certain
Mhm.
way. So there's also a lot of freedom in just being able to self-express and don't really think that much about what the teacher was going to say or the person giving you a grade, what they were going to say.
Mhm.
So for my own uh, from my own standpoint, it was also about kind of being a bit rebellious. Do you recognize this in your own process?
Yeah, I think it's a very good way of putting it. I really like that. I think that um, it allows me to be more myself. Mm, my mm, um, my TechoLlama persona is more how I think. I can't do that in some articles. I try sometimes to add a little bit of spice, but yeah, it allows me to be a little more free. Sometimes a couple of times I try to keep it family friendly, but I try to sometimes be a little bit more spicy in my language. But yeah, it's just a nice freedom to have that I only have to think about myself and think about the audience. Would they like this? Would they think um, would be interested in this? And yeah, Um, Still getting an audience. So people, every time I write a new blog post, people read it. So yeah, still, it's very nice to still have people who are interested in it.
Do you get some angry comments from time to time, and how do you react if people are criticizing you?
Not on my blog, actually. I think that the last time I got negative comments on the blog itself was ages ago. I think the angriest comments I ever got was on Bitcoin. Bitcoiners didn't like my my
Hmm.
articles on the subject, so there were quite a lot of comments. My reaction is I always, if it's justified, I will say, oh yeah, a good point. If I try to leave them always online, I don't think I've ever deleted a comment. I think I've deleted just a couple which were absolutely, or I delete spam as well. So in the blog itself, no, there are no comments. I think I get more pushback on places like Twitter, but Twitter is Twitter, so
Hmm.
um, that's that's um, its own place, really. It has its own little um, communities, and yeah, sometimes it can generate a little bit of bad blood in that respect. But the blog itself, it's surprisingly calm. The people who comment are usually very, very polite. I think that maybe they're afraid that I can track them somehow, which
Hmm.
I've never done. Yeah,
It's also a bigger investment to go on someone's blog and criticize them than it is to just write on a Twitter post some angry comment. It's too easy to do that.
yeah.
Ah.
It is sort of interesting to me that it's absolutely entirely like two different places. I leave my comments open, and they're absolutely. I mean, uh, I don't remove stuff, and yeah, just people will not come and comment, but they will do it on other platforms. It's LinkedIn is also very polite. I've never had any problems on LinkedIn. It's usually Twitter.
That's also why I like LinkedIn so much, because people know that their boss are looking over their shoulders, or
Yeah,
they might be, so they're a bit more careful about criticizing, and at least a bit more compared to X now. I don't use it. I've deleted my Twitter account shortly after it became X. But I had some friend who paid for like a paid membership on X. I'm not even sure what it's called these days, but he told me that it's pretty horrifying. The
yeah.
content you come by there, it's just a complete dumpster fire.
Yeah, it's the quality has become um, it, it's pretty bad. I still get some enjoyment from it because of the I've curated my timeline very strongly, and I have very strong quality filters as well. So I usually I still enjoy it, and I still get some um, good ideas from it. Sometimes, like I find out a case that I hadn't read or something. It's usually either LinkedIn or Twitter where I can do it. I don't. By the way, I don't call it X, or I think it's called X now, but it will always be Twitter for me. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I think that's generally where most negativity has come from. My experience blogging has been absolutely, with a couple of very minor exceptions, has been very positive. Um, I get I'm better known by the blog as TechoLlama than by my own name.
Hmm.
It's funny. Sometimes I've been to a meeting recently at a conference. A friend introduced me to a friend of hers, and she was telling, "Oh, you must know Andres. Andres Guadamuz is at the University of Sussex. And she went, no, no. Oh, no. You probably know him as TechoLlama. And he said, oh, and she said, oh yes, of course. I know you. I love your blog. It is very interesting that yeah, I'm more famous because of that than my own academic output.
There are also few people who do it actually. Like
Yeah,
considering how many professors and intellectuals are out there. Usually, academics they stick with research papers and such. There are surprisingly few blogs. So especially also like in the fields maybe regarding law, where it's a bit heavy sometimes
yeah.
and can be a bit dry. People are maybe a bit afraid to speak out their opinion. So it's also easier to stand out.
Yeah, I think potentially that's one of the things there is still a function there, and yeah, I wish I had more time uh, to blog. Sometimes, um, if I'm very busy, exams or essays or things like that, it's more difficult to find the time to write something. And I'm more considerate on what I write. Sometimes if there was a week I wrote like 4 articles in one week, very recently, and sometimes there is a month that I just don't get any ideas on what to write. So yeah, it has to feel right. It has to be a subject that I said um, that I'm interested in, that I want to deal with.
Hmm. But that you get recognized by your pseudonym, that's a huge success in itself, I imagine.
Yeah, it can be, but I've joked before that now I know what Clark Kent thinks of Superman.
Yeah,
It's sort of,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. I wonder if Clark Kent ever gets jealous of Superman. Yeah,
Yeah, but I see what you mean. It is kind of like a mask, that
yeah,
it's very cool.
yeah.
So before we wrap up, what is your take on AI for the next couple of years? What are you interested in to look into?
Well, as I mentioned, voice cloning, I think it's my interest is going to be a huge subject. I'm surprised it sort of has been, but I'm surprised it hasn't taken over a little bit more. So voice cloning, I think, is going to be interesting. Next 2 years is going to be they're going to be fascinating because we're potentially going to get the first decisions on some of the AI cases. There's one that I'm awaiting in Germany, which is actually, I think it's taking place in the next 3 days. Um, and then there are going to be some of the US cases as well that are going to get decided. And we are going to start seeing what the future will look like. Will it be a little bit more like the Napster era, or is it going to be a little bit more like the YouTube era of internet regulation? So it's going to be very interesting in those cases. That's what we need to look for. And the technology itself is just advancing at an amazing pace. It's just getting better all the time. So uh, it's going to be exciting, whatever happens, I guess.
And the German case, what can you explain what that was about?
It's a photographer is suing Lion. Lion is a non-profit organization, a research organization that is uh, they make one of the largest data sets that are used in in training image data sets. So a specific photographer found some of the images on the dataset, so sued for copyright infringement. I don't think I would be very surprised if it's successful, to be honest. But that's on the particulars of EU law and German law, I think. Yeah, but it's happening soon.
Do you think that there will be a New York Times lawsuit in Europe, a corresponding one?
Yeah, I've heard, maybe not in New York Times, but I've heard of media organizations that are potentially thinking of bringing a case here in the UK.
That would be interesting because I
Yeah.
could imagine that, in Europe in general, the courts would be siding a bit more with the creators. I could imagine where maybe the US are a bit more tech open.
Yeah, I think it's fair use is a better defense in some ways, but also fair dealing, the fair dealing that is contained in the Digital Single Market Directive, Articles 3 and 4, I think, allows some of these companies pretty good cover if they are respecting opt-outs. That is another question, but yeah.
Very cool. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up, Andreas. It was really nice talking with you.
Yeah. Thanks. It was very nice talking to you too. Thanks for the excellent questions.
Thanks. And where can people contact you or find you?
It's TechoLlama. Techno as music or technology, and llama like the animal. I'm very easy to find.
Amazing. Thanks for your time.